Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Okay, I have a lot to get through. I'm going to try to talk really fast, and at the end, if you have questions, I'll put up a slide that has my info on it. This is the Buck Institute. We're about 20 miles north of San Francisco. If you're ever in the area, you should come visit. I'm not going to talk at all about my lab's research, but if you're interested, you can look us up. The Buck is an interesting place. It brings together scientists from different disciplines, all in service of trying to understand basic mechanisms of aging. And the impetus behind this is that for every disease of the modern world, your age is actually the #1 risk factor for whether or not you're going to suffer from it. So over the last decade or so, there's been a huge explosion in our knowledge of biological mechanisms of aging. And the goal is that if we can understand those mechanisms, we could exploit that knowledge to tackle all of these diseases simultaneously, rather than hitting them one at a time. And of course, our goal is to extend health span, not lifespan. So we're not talking about making people live forever. We're talking about really squaring off this curve and trying to make people as healthy as possible for as long as possible. But we can't talk about healthy longevity without addressing the fact that there is an organ system that really falls off this curve, and that is the female reproductive system. So we have organs that are essentially aging faster than other tissues in our bodies. And I wanted to acknowledge that this does happen also in the male system. The difference is that in males, aging in the reproductive system is synced up with aging in the rest of their bodies. Whereas for us, we have this whole organ system that is essentially falling off a cliff in the middle of our lives, and that has a dramatic impact on our overall health. So it's also important to acknowledge that women do live longer than men on average in every country where it's been measured. Women live about 5 years longer than men on average. However, they spend a significantly longer portion of their lives. If they're lucky enough to live to old age, they're going to spend a significantly longer portion of their lives in poor health. So this is really important to keep in mind. And the reason for that is directly related to aging in the ovaries. So ovaries are aging at more than 2 times the rate of the tissue and the rest of my body, and that has profound impacts for health. So you can think about ovaries kind of like the canary in the coal mine for aging. So I wanted to, even though everyone in this room is probably an expert, I wanted to just take a moment and acknowledge why we're all here and to level set a little bit. So when we talk about myths and misconceptions in women's health, I think this graph is really emblematic of many of those myths and misconceptions. So this is a graph that's looking at the quality and the number of eggs that a female has over time. And this is an average. So it's absolutely true on average that the number of eggs that you have is going to decline in this way over time. And I will say that this cartoon depiction is almost exactly the resolution with which we understand these processes. Like, we have absolutely no idea what's going on. What we do know is that at birth, a female human has about 1 million eggs, and that number goes down to about 300,000 by puberty. And then once a female starts cycling, that is going to be about 1,000 eggs per month that are lost. So while 1 egg is ovulated, about 1,000 are recruited to grow, and those other 999 will die through atresia. And the age at which a woman goes through menopause is correlated with a steep decline in the number of eggs and the quality of eggs. But we don't actually know what that relationship is, where the causal factors are. We don't know. We know that they're correlated. But this is an average. And at the level of an individual, female physiology is incredibly complex. It's stochastic. Young women who are healthy go through periods of infertility. Older women go through periods of hyperfertility. And so at the level of the individual, this is not what it looks like. It's totally different. And so I think we need to think about female physiology as and treat it as a complex multivariate signature in human health. We have absolutely no idea why ovarian function declines so precipitously, and that's something that we're trying to work on. Another sort of myth and misconception about women's health is that ovarian function is only important for fertility and menopause. We tend to bookend it that way. And I will say that I'm trying very hard to be like the ambassador for saying your ovaries do more than just baby making. And you might notice that this image, I don't know if it shows up here, but I was trying to find an image that didn't have a skirt or high heels. in a picture of women across their lifespan, and I could not. This was the closest I could find. So we have a lot of work to do there too. But what's important to understand about ovaries is that they are important for lots of things, and when they are not working properly, that what it does essentially is it uncovers a different set of health risks depending on your age. So in very young women, it can uncover issues with cycling, it can uncover issues with going through puberty. In slightly older women, it can be things like miscarriages and infertility, PCOS, POI. When ovarian function starts to fluctuate in midlife, that can be the symptoms of perimenopause. And when ovarian function precipitously declines at menopause, that can uncover a whole other host of health risks. But the point is that ovaries are important throughout your life. They're important for more than just baby making. And they really do sit at the center of the signaling network. So I think of ovaries as like the architects of health in female bodies. So they are sending chemical signals to almost every tissue in your body. I listed a bunch here, I'm not gonna go through them, but each one of those conversations is different. But what you can say is that they're promoting general health. And as a result, when I think about ovaries aging prematurely or faster than the rest of the tissue in my body, what that means functionally is that they're like a pacemaker for aging in women. And so we need to refocus our attention and our research and everything we're doing to think about healthy aging in women through this lens. We're very familiar with what happens when ovaries are malfunctioning in midlife with respect to fertility. But when they stop working the way that they were before at menopause, that has profound impacts on health risks. It increases risk of cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, autoimmune disease, all of the things that are listed here. And I think that this is truly an issue. I'm not sure what's wrong with my slides, but an issue of equality. So the fact that women go through this ovarian decline in midlife really does set up an inherent inequality. Men don't have to deal with this. And yet, from the moment I went through puberty, every single decision that I made as an adult, thinking about my career, family planning, everything that I was doing, educational choices, I had this ticking biological clock in the background, even though I didn't want to have biological children. And this is something where I think when we're talking about healthy aging, when we're talking about longevity, as we're extending healthy longevity, and we're making lots of great inroads in that space, if we don't consider ovarian function and think about aging in women, then we're going to make this kind of inequality worse and not better. So when I come back to this picture, what I want is to understand these three very important questions about this ridiculous cartoon. Number one is what sets this in motion? What is driving ovaries to age faster than the rest of the body? We have absolutely no idea. Why is it so different between individuals? Why is it that the age at which a woman goes through menopause can span 14 years and be called normal? There's no other signature in human health that's so variable at the level of the individual. If we could understand that, then that would give us a huge clue about what these underlying mechanisms are. And then why it happens so early. Why is it that it's not synced up with aging in the rest of the body? If I could summarize in one sentence what we want to do, it's just simply that. I want to be able to sync up aging in ovaries with aging in the rest of a woman's body, full stop. So why are we here? How is it possible that we don't already know the answers to these questions? I don't want to belabor the point, but there has been, in addition to societal taboos around talking about female bodies and studying them, there has been a dramatic lack of funding. And what we fund it dictates what we know. So this is an example from the US from 2022, the National Institutes of Health. That is the largest biomedical research funding body in the world. The budget was around $45 billion. About 10% of that, in purple, went to all of women's health from conception through death. And a tiny piece of that, basically a rounding error, was focused on trying to understand aging in the female reproductive tract. So this is changing, it's getting better year by year, but it's a ridiculously small amount of money, and as a result, we haven't had a lot of work focused on this space. On the private side, I'm sure you've heard about this already today, but At least in 2022, it was big news that investment in women's health was 10 times higher than it had been in 2017. Yet, it was still less than 4% of all of the pharma investment, all of the biotech investment. So we need to do better here. And it's insane that there aren't more investors waking up to this, since we do happen to make up half the population. If you just focus on menopause, since this is having a moment, I think it's really emblematic of funding in all of the women's health space. But in the menopause market, which is huge and growing, only 5% of startups have focused on menopause that are looking at women's health. And that's in light of, in opposition to the actual data, right? So many women consider leaving their jobs at that point in their lives because those symptoms of perimenopause can impact your ability to actually function in your everyday life. And of course, 80% of the people who spend money on healthcare are in this demographic. I hope that this is changing, and I think the fact that you're all here today and that this is such a vibrant and amazing meeting is hopefully a sign that this is getting better. But what I will say is that all of the companies that I know about, with two exceptions, are treating symptoms and not the underlying causes. And that is not because it's not interesting, it's not because it's not important, it's because we literally don't have the IP to generate the startups that will do this. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But when I come back to this, this very important note, I'm gonna appeal to this audience to say, we have to stop calling them reproductive organs, please. The fact that we've called them reproductive organs has allowed all of women's health to be pigeonholed into this lens of fertility. And while fertility is super important, it's not the only thing that's happening here. So I'm calling them ovaries, I'm calling them fallopian tubes, I'm calling them the uterus. I'm not calling them reproductive organs anymore. So about 6 years ago now, at the Buck Institute, we recognized that this was important. We decided to start a center to study healthy aging in females through the lens of ovarian function. The center is made up of faculty at the Buck, but also faculty from outside, and we made it into a collaboration hub where we hope that we can innovate and move things forward faster. But almost as soon as we started this center, it became clear that if we were going to do anything important, it was going to have to be a lot bigger. I mean, a lot bigger. So that is where this global consortium came from. So I won't read the name to you because we're in the middle of changing it. So you've caught us in the middle of a rebrand, but GCRLE is too hard for people to remember, even though I feel like every one of those words was important. And again, I'm trying to get away from using the word reproductive. So we're changing our name to productive health. And the point of that really is to focus on what it is we want people to think about. But our goal in starting this global consortium was to bring everyone who has an interest in the space into the same room, not just the scientists and the clinicians, but the investors, the biotech, the pharma, the policymakers, and the ambassadors like you here. And our goal is to facilitate and accelerate translating those basic science discoveries in the lab into women's hands faster, like however we can do that. So what we've been doing is a lot of stuff, which you can read about on our website. But one of the major things that I think is important for this audience is to say that we spend a lot of time thinking about how to facilitate getting those discoveries and those early stage founders and the scientists who are making the discoveries to make companies. So we have a trusted investor circle, we have demo days where we bring together early stage founders with potential investors. Eventually we hope to start an accelerator, but we're not there yet because we haven't seen the IP that will generate those interventions, those things that are actually going to move the needle beyond Band-Aids. So I'm happy to talk about this more later. But the biggest thing we've done so far is to fund the research. So we've been giving away grants to scientists and clinicians all over the world, $14.5 million to 49 scientists so far. And we want to keep doing this. Right now, we're working on innovating to extend, we've given away grants that are 2 years. And so what happens at the end of those 2 years is that the scientist who has that money either pivots to get another grant or the project dies. So we're working on an innovative model for funding that will be a sustainable way for people who are already grantees to apply to be able to continue the work they're doing. And I just wanted to end on a positive note. So I will say that 5 years ago when we started the center, There wasn't a lot of discussion in this space, and now it's really become, I think, a topic of discussion, not just among women, but among policymakers, among funders, among the people who can really make a difference here. And so everything is moving in the right direction. And in terms of policy, here in the UK, I feel like you guys are far ahead of us in the US, although we're catching up a little bit. I won't go through all of these things, but there's a lot of really exciting stuff happening. So I want to end by thanking the people who have helped us. We have a scientific advisory council that helps us choose our grants. Bevan Lynn and Nick Gentry helped us get started. Alison Rodriguez is one of the most amazing administrative leads I have ever worked with. And we've just brought on an entrepreneur in residence who is going to help us, I hope, move things into the clinic faster. And I've never done this before, but we are a philanthropic organization, and we are doing a big fundraise to support those grants and to support the sustainable funding. So if you know anyone who's interested in supporting philanthropy that funds the research to understand women's health, please send them my way. And if you'd like to get in touch or be part of our network, the consortium is meant to include everybody, and that includes ambassadors who can spread the word about what we're doing. So please, there's a QR code that links to my contact information. I would love to hear from you. So I'll end there.